Goldcrest University had a hierarchy as old as its walls. At the top sat Camille and Rena, daughters of empire, girls who walked through crowds the way sunlight walks through glass. Effortless. Blinding. Untouchable. Then there was Sade. Sade didn't arrive at Goldcrest with connections or a family name worth dropping. She arrived with a second-hand backpack, a mind sharp enough to cut glass, and a quiet hunger to belong somewhere bigger than the one-room flat she grew up in. Camille and Rena found her the way wealthy people find useful things, accidentally, and then completely. She helped them pass exams. She stayed late explaining things twice, 3 times, without complaint. She defended Camille in a departmental dispute that could have gotten her suspended. She lied to a lecturer once, just once, to cover for Rena's absence during a family crisis Rena never fully explained. Small sacrifices, each one. The kind that don't feel like sacrifices when you believe the friendship is real. And slowly, dangerously, she mistook their need for her as love. The night of Camille's rooftop party, Sade hesitated at the entrance. Everything about the place whispered you don't belong here. The cars were imported. The perfume alone cost more than her monthly allowance. But Rena pulled her inside with a smile, and belonging felt so close she could taste it. What she actually tasted was the drink Camille pressed into her hand. Then the tablet. Small. White. Casual. Just to loosen up, Camille said, already turning away like the conversation was already over. Sade had said no 3 times. The 4th time, she said nothing. And silence, she would never know, was the most expensive word she ever swallowed. 20 minutes later, Sade was on the floor. Not dancing. Not laughing. Still. The music didn't stop. Nobody screamed loud enough for the crowd to hear. Camille stood over her body and made the only calculation she knew, risk versus reputation, and reputation won before Rena could finish crying. They waited until the last guest stumbled home. Then they carried Sade out like something that needed to be hidden before morning. What they didn't know was that someone had been standing outside the gate since midnight, someone who looked so much like Sade it was almost cruel. Her twin sister, Nora. And Nora had seen everything. Nora didn't scream that night. She couldn't afford to. She followed them in silence, hired a taxi, kept her distance, watched through tears as 2 girls with manicured nails dug a shallow grave in the red earth outside the city, arguing in whispers the whole time. She watched Rena apologize to the soil. She watched Camille wipe her hands and walk back to the car like she had buried a secret, not a person. When they drove away, Nora crawled to the grave on her hands and knees. She pressed her palm flat against the loose, warm soil and stayed there until her knees were stained red with earth and her throat ached from crying without sound. She didn't go to the police the next morning. She knew better. Camille's father had photographs with 3 government ministers on his office wall. If she walked into a station raw and grieving with nothing but her word, Sade's story would be rewritten before it was ever told. Witnesses would forget. Evidence would vanish. And a quiet, brilliant girl from a one-room flat would become a footnote, a troubled student, a bad decision, a cautionary tale about the wrong kind of people mixing with the right kind. Nora refused to let her sister become a footnote. So she did something harder than reporting them. She became her sister. Same clothes. Same walk. Same soft way Sade had of tilting her head when she was listening. Nora had spent 22 years being the other half of one person. She knew every detail by heart, every habit, every mannerism so deeply familiar it lived in her body without thinking. When she walked onto campus, the reaction was immediate. Whispers chased her down every corridor. Camille heard the rumors mid-lecture and went completely still. Rena's hands wouldn't stop shaking through an entire class. When they finally saw her, standing in the courtyard, alive, smiling, Rena made a sound like something breaking inside her chest. Camille's face did something it had never done in public. It showed fear. Nora hugged them both. Felt their bodies go rigid with guilt. Said, gently, "I missed you girls." That night, she checked the recording device she had been wearing since morning. Every word. Every panicked exchange. Every whispered confession between two girls who thought a dead girl couldn't hear them anymore. She had one move left. She just needed them to go back to the grave. And she knew they would. Guilty people always return to what they buried. The grave was empty when Camille and Rena arrived. Nora had made sure of that. She had removed Sade's body days earlier, quietly and legally, and handed it to a forensic pathologist whose report now sat in a police evidence folder alongside DNA samples, a time-stamped audio recording, and a taxi driver's sworn statement. But she needed them to stand over that empty hole first. She needed them to feel what Sade felt, the ground giving way beneath them. When Nora stepped out of the darkness and said her name, Rena collapsed before the sentence was finished. All the weeks of pretending, of walking past Nora on campus with forced smiles, of lying awake at night rehearsing a silence that was slowly eating her from the inside, it all broke at once. She fell to her knees in the same red earth where Sade had been buried and could not get up. Camille tried to run. Tried to bargain. Tried, finally, to wrap her hands around Nora's throat, which was the last voluntary thing she did before 4 plainclothes officers moved in from the trees. The arrests were quiet. The aftermath was not. By morning, the story was everywhere. University socialites. Shallow grave. A girl who topped every class and was loved by everyone who didn't have something to gain from her. The kind of story that travels fast because it touches something people already half knew about the world, that the most dangerous thing a poor, brilliant girl can do is trust someone who only values what she can give them. In the courtroom, Rena wept through her entire testimony. I knew it was wrong. I knew from the first second. And I said nothing. Camille said nothing at sentencing. Just stared forward, already somewhere else in her head. The girl who had always had an answer for everything had finally run out of words. Nora spoke last. She didn't speak about justice. She didn't speak about revenge. She stood at the podium and described one thing only: the morning Sade got her university acceptance letter and called her, laughing so hard she couldn't form words for a full minute. Just laughing. Just alive. She deserved to become everything she was becoming, Nora said. That's all. The courtroom was silent for a long time after that. The sentence came down on a Thursday. Camille, 15 years, no parole consideration for 5. Rena, 7 years, with mandatory counseling and community restitution. The judge had looked at them both for a long moment before speaking, the way people look at things they are trying to understand and cannot. Outside the courthouse, the sun was almost offensive in its brightness. Nora stood on the steps, still in the same simple black dress she had worn every day of the trial, and felt the strangest thing, not the explosion of relief she had expected, not triumph, not the clean sharp satisfaction of a completed mission. Just a vast, open quiet. Like a room after everyone has finally gone home. Her phone rang. It was Professor Adiz, Sade's favorite lecturer, the woman who had submitted Sade's final research paper posthumously to a national academic journal 3 weeks earlier, refusing to let a brilliant mind's last work go unread. Nora, she said, her voice thick with something. The journal called this morning. Sade's paper has been accepted. They want to publish it in next month's edition. They are dedicating the issue to her. Nora sat down on the courthouse steps. She didn't say anything for a long time. Her name would be on the cover, Professor Addis continued softly. Sade Mensa. Imprint. Permanent. Something cracked open in Nora's chest that had been sealed shut since the night of the party, not breaking, but opening. The way a window opens to let the air back in. She pressed the phone to her heart and cried in a way she hadn't allowed herself to cry since everything began. Not the grief tears, not the anger tears, not the strategic, controlled weeping of a woman with a plan to execute. These were something different. Softer. Older. The tears of a sister who had carried something enormous and was only now, standing in the sunlight outside the courthouse, beginning to set it down. 2 weeks later, Nora returned to Goldcrest, not as a ghost, not as a weapon, but as herself. She walked into the lecture hall where Sade had spent 3 years building a future and sat in her sister's usual seat. Front row. Left side. Closest to the window. She opened a notebook. She picked up a pen. And she began, not where Sade had ended, but from the same place Sade had started. With nothing but a sharp mind, a quiet determination, and a name worth making mean something. She wrote one sentence at the top of the first page. For Sade, who deserved to become everything she was becoming. Then she looked up at the window, at the sky beyond it, wide and unhurried and full of the kind of light that doesn't ask permission. And for the first time in a long time, Nora smiled.